Welcome to Painting with Yuk-Sem. Today we're going to be working on a bit of a stained glass look, and we're going to be using a black gessoed canvas. So what I have is the black gesso canvas. It's the same thing as the white ones, except for instead of using the white primer, which has the a bit of plaster in it, what they've done is that they've done it with black. And it gives you a nice dark surface that you don't have to worry about putting that black paint on first. So in order to get the stained glass effect, what I'm using, it's called washi tape, or you can use a really thin masking tape. And I'm going to put some of that on first in a design on the canvas that I'm going to then be painting over. So, and we'll hope that it sticks. And I'm going to try and get geometrically to try and find a pattern, because I'm going to be doing a bird on top. So what I want it to look like is something like the rays of the sun coming through a stained glass window as well. So when you're putting down the tape, whether it's masking tape or anything like that, you have to really make sure that you press down on the edges so that it gets the paint won't bleed through, and that you're getting that nice adhesion onto it. So I'm not thinking too much about where they're going, just more about direction. And then once I have the main lines, when I start cutting them, that's when I'm going to start, you know, deciding on the size and the shapes that I want. So I'm going to put one down here, just to get that bottom corner, so that it's not feeling so left out. Something like that. All right. So now that I have my main lines taped down, I can come in and start cutting some angles across. So when you're putting the tape on, you have to remember that you don't want the paint or the tape to overlap that other piece here. And if it does, just either fold it down or use some scissors and cut it, because whatever has the masking tape on it actually won't get painted on. So if you have too many pieces that are overlapping, you're going to get that jagged edge down there too. So this takes a little bit more preparation than just starting on your canvas, but it'll save you so much time at the end than trying to introduce the black lines after. So we'll just do a few more through it here, remembering that you can make some geographic, or not geometric, not geographic, geometric designs, working with your triangles and your parallel lines to make it visually interesting, because we're going to be filling those in with different colors, just like in a stained glass window. Another way is if you have a stencil or an image that you want to put on, and then work what ends up being the lead lines afterwards, you can do that too. So there's a lot of ways that you can play around with this effect, but it just makes for a really nice, easy painting that I've done with a lot of different classes, all the different ages, and it usually comes out looking pretty awesome. And it looks like you put in a ton of effort cutting the lines, when really you just use the tools that you had at hand and made sure that it's in a way that is a little bit innovative and interesting. So I think the last one might be to add one there to cut up that big square. So now you see I have all the squares. There's some big ones, some small ones, and it's going to look something like a stained glass window. So the last part is that I've cut out a design of a bird And what this paper is, it's called Frisket, and you can use there's a tape that you can find for the bottom of your drawers that works just as well. And then I just cut it out in the shape, and then when you peel off the back, it ends up being a sticker. I've also used actual stickers, the decals for the walls. You can use those that you can get fairly inexpensively now. And then you can just put it on there, knowing that you're going to be peeling it off after as well. So the trick is to get it on there, basically, and then you can come back, and if it doesn't stick to itself on the first go, we're doing good. So I'm going to start from the top and just make sure that the edges are all stuck down so that the paint again won't bleed under the sticker, and that my shape is the way that I want. Just rubbing it down. I've done this with geometric shapes like circles and squares. If you wanted to do something around the holiday theme, you can do it with the circles, and then it looks like the Christmas balls. The silhouette of the Christmas balls are there. That's really nice too. Different flower patterns, animal silhouettes. You can do a really nice stained glass effect with like the deer or the moose silhouettes. And just like that, we have the start of our stained glass window, and that's all ready now for us to start painting. So as I'm painting, I'm just going to make sure that those edges stay down, because that one's tending to lift up a little bit. All right, so now our canvas is all prepped. You can add more lines or less. Remember, at some point, there is a fine line between having enough and having too much. So just keep that in mind. When you're painting on black, one of the things that you have to remember is that acrylic paint has really nice pigments, but some of it is a little bit more transparent. So I always tend to use the cadmium-based colors, so the cadmium red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, cadmium green, and then I use a very light blue and the ultramarine, and then the violet. For the colors that don't have cadmium, I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white to them, and that'll give them that staying power where the light will be able to be reflected instead of eaten up, and then you just have a dark color. So we're going to go right in to our paints with some water and into the cadmium red. I want the light to be here, so when I'm painting in the squares, one of the tricks that I use is that I'll keep the main color in the middle, and then when it gets to the edge of where that light is coming from, I'm going to add just a touch of white to it and blend that in, and then come back at that cadmium red and blend all of that together. And then when it gets to the darker edge of it, I'm just going to grab a little bit of that black, add it in, and then that end and edge of that shape now is a bit darker. So you get that lighting effect here and the shading without having too much effort. And if you've watched any of the other ones, it's all about the least amount of effort and using your tools and the tips to really get a nice effect without working too hard at it. So one of the things that here with the red, I want it a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to come back in. Now that it's a little bit dry, if you come in and put in a second coat, on top. Sometimes that helps. And it's going to be just watching to see what color you really want out of your end product. So next one, we're going to try that Cadmium Orange. I'm going to come in here, and it's the same thing. So I'm getting that nice bright color in the middle, making sure that I'm painting all the way to the edge of that tape. That you do have to paint over it, trying at the same time to control your brush so it doesn't go over into the next square or space. At the front end, by where the light is, a little bit of the white, mixing it in with the orange. So the nice thing about the cadmium series, so the paint with the cadmium in it, is that you do get all those nice colors that have very little transparency. You're able to get that vibrancy without having to really go and build the color up to get the true color of it. I'm going to get a bit of the black, go into that orange, and at the back end of this have that darkened color. Wash off that brush. And because we're going to be putting a lot of different colors in there, I want to be mindful of which colors are side by side, so that anything that I want to be like tones, or if you wanted it to look more like trees or a forest, then you would use the blues up top and the greens in the bottom, things like that. Because I want this to be more like the light pattern coming here, so when it comes down into this area, I'm going to start using the yellows. So now I'm going to go into the cadmium yellow. And making sure, whenever I'm painting over that stencil, to make sure that that area is stuck down. I think maybe I'll use the big one here. So making sure that all that stencil is stuck down, so that if I'm painting, mind you, I have a tip at the end of when the stencil has lifted, so I'm not going to be too worried about it. When you're painting against a stencil, always paint away from it if you can, because as you paint into the stencil like this, what happens is that you're forcing the paint to go underneath it a little bit, and then that's when you'll get a lot more of that bleeding. So once you have the, especially when you're putting on that first layer, to make sure that you're not forcing it into that stencil too much. So now that I'm getting the base coat, and you can see some of that black is coming through with the yellow, because in order to get yellow, to get it completely opaque is really hard unless you use lots of white with it. So I'm going to go get some of that white, and you'll see that there's going to be a difference. If I use the white with the yellow down in this corner, that yellow now has a lot of luminosity, a lot of that light that's able to come through, because it bounces off the white as well as the yellow. So just making sure that I'm blending, getting all that color on there. Then I'm going to come into the cadmium, just the yellow again. And that's where you can start playing with the layers of the paint as well. And then add a bit of water and a touch of the black to get that shadow over here on that area. There we go. So this one isn't going to be so much about a lot of technique, because we're blending with the colors. and working with the stencils, but it does have a really nice effect in the end with the end result. So you can see that the green has a lot of that color, even on the black canvas. So that cadmium green is one of my favorites when I'm painting on a black canvas. But remember that if you do use it, that it will have that power and all of that light compared to your other colors. So if you're not careful with your other ones, and then all of a sudden you use that cadmium green, that one's almost going to look fluorescent when you're using it. So I'm adding a little bit of white to the front end of it, blending that in. I'm going to wash some of that off, and then go with a touch of the black and get that back corner shaded. And making sure that I'm blending all of that together. Here I see, now my yellow's dried a little bit, I can see that maybe I want to add just a touch on a second layer of paint, just to get a bit more uniform coating. Now I'm not so worried about the stencil because the paint actually helps it adhere a bit better to it. You'll see that the paint's going to slip off that plastic, but that's all right. I'm not too worried about that piece. And if you see that when you're putting on a second layer, and right about here, you see the paint starting to slip, and it's because the underlayer wasn't quite dry enough to start adding the other one. So I'm just going to wipe off the excess paint, and I'm going to give it a few more minutes to dry, and then I'll come back and add some on. So if ever you find that you're touching up something and you're going over it, and then the paint, you start seeing the canvas underneath, or the paint starts coming off, it's just that it hasn't had time to adhere to the canvas or dry enough in order to make those layers stick to each other. So now I have the blue, and I'm going to make sure that that's stuck down. I'm going to get the impression of the sky here and work with nice bright blue beside the yellow. With a dab of white. And I come down here. And by always putting the white coming from the same edge, when you take it off, take off the stickers, you'll see that it gives you a really nice glowing effect, because your eyes will turn it in to something like there's the light that's shining through. So this end has a little bit of the black for that shadow. Just once again blending it, watching that it's not going, that stencil is not moving too much. Alright, next color we're going to go into that dark blue. So like I said with the dark blue, if I was just to put on, I'll just take off some of that white and make sure that I'm getting just the dark blue. So we'll do this one up here. If I were to put on just the dark blue, you almost don't see it. But by adding just that touch, even just a little bit of white that was on my brush, but by adding a little bit of white, the light really bounces off and then adds that nice bright color up there. So if ever you have a color that you want to use but you can't see it on the black, add just a touch of white. You're going to get that color anyways, but it'll also change that and make it less transparent. And I grab just a bit of the dark blue. Instead of grabbing the black, I'm just using the dark blue and getting that up there. All right. Now with the purple, with the violet, you'll see that there's almost, you can't even see it at all. So I'll put some on there. All it does is look wet, and because there's no light. The light is hitting the black canvas, and there's nothing bouncing out to show you that purple. But the minute that you add just a touch of that white to it, that's when the color really pops. So in the middle, I just want it to be a little bit, to really get that sense of the purple. At the front end, I'm going to add quite a bit of white to it. Make sure that I get that lightness coming through. Making sure there's coverage. And then in the back, you can just go back to using just the purple instead of adding the black to it, because it'll still be that dark color. Just enough white that was still on my brush to make it so that it's got that color in there. So if you're painting on top of a black area, remember, you can, if you want that color to pop, just add a little bit of white to it, and often that will help. All right. So this one's switching a lot of colors. Now I've used all the basic colors, and I should have enough to use one more go at each one. So wherever I've used a color, I'm going to try and move it away to somewhere else. I really like the fact that the yellow and the blue are here. They're two primary colors. So what I'm going to do is add the third primary color here, which is the red, to have that, those three colors really pop. One beside each other. So that, I think, we'll see how that turns out. And if I didn't like it in the end, I just paint over it anyways. So that's not too bad. I love acrylic paint. You can always just, if you don't like something, you wait for it to dry and you just paint over it. So there's that light source. I'm going to come in, wash that brush off, and get some of the white off, go back into the dark. Add just a touch of that shadow in there. And with the orange is down here, so I'm going to come up here. Because you don't want them too close together unless you're building up something, like if you're building up trees, then you might want all the different greens together. But in this case, I think I just want it to be a little bit everywhere. A touch of white in the bottom. And because the light is still on this side, I don't want to have too much shadow in there. I'm going to avoid the yellow to really keep, I'm going to do that one yellow there. So I'm going to do this nice big one here, green, because I love how vibrant it is. It'll look a little bit like grass. Just a touch of the white, some of the green, get that light coming down. And then go in with the dark. So now it's more about playing around with the light and the dark. Down in the corner. And then we still have, you do one of the blues up here. With a bit of the black. because it's the back edge, so I'm not playing too much with the light. I'm going to play more with the shadow. Dark blue, remember it's up there, so maybe we'll come in and add it right into the sky here. So I'm using that dark blue first, and now I'm going to go and add some of that white. Making sure my stencil is nice and flat on there. Painting away from the edges. Like that. Making sure I've covered all my spots. All the way up to that tape. Now we can get into those last few purple ones. I like the purple. It still has a little bit of that white. I'm going to add, because the yellow is there, I'm going to come in with the purple to make it pop, because it's yellow and purple are complementary colors, so whenever you have the two side by side, it really shouts out. And the reason that is because purple is made up of blue and yellow, blue and red, which are the two opposite colors to that yellow. So it really comes in and adds a really nice effect. We'll get this one. And then the two last ones. And a bit of the blue. Once you've finished all your squares, this is when the magic happens. Oh, I didn't finish that one. One more. Like that. So once you're done, this is where the magic happens. Right, like that. And as you can see, the placement of the colors really makes a big difference. So thank you for painting with me. I hope that you have fun and that you give this a try. And we'll see you next time on Painting with Yuk-Sem.